Richard the Lionheart. You hear that name, right? And immediately you probably picture this image of chivalry, incredible courage, pretty much the perfect English hero.
Yeah, hero, legend, warrior king, the whole package. We all feel like we know his story, don't we? But what if the guy we all remember isn't real? What if he's just a story, a character that was built for a reason? Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Let's dig in and try to find the real Richard the First among all these different versions of him.
All right, first up, let's talk about the legend. The version everyone knows. The popular image of Richard is, well, it's almost superhuman. This is a guy who was basically forged in the fire of the Third Crusade, a warrior who was so good at what he did that he was famous even while he was still alive. And this right here, this just perfectly sums up that larger-than-life vibe. It's an account from the Battle of Jaffa. And get this, he's the first guy to jump off the boat, charges ashore with a crossbow and a Danish axe, and just goes for it. The account says he inspired his men to fight like madmen. I mean, come on, that is the Lionheart of legend. But, that legend, it's a great story, and there's some truth to it for sure. But it papers over a way more complicated reality. Because behind that charging warrior, there was a really smart, really calculating military commander. And there was also a guy who was capable of some truly shocking brutality. Take his march from Acre to Jaffa. That wasn't some reckless, wild charge like you'd see in the movies. No, it was an absolute masterclass in military strategy. I mean, just look at this stuff. He sets up this layered defense where his infantry protect the super valuable mounted knights. He's got a fleet sailing alongside them for constant supplies, which is, absolutely genius. He made his men so disciplined they wouldn't even react to enemy taunts trying to get them to break rank. And he used the best of the best, the Knights Templar and Hospitaller, as his front and back guards. This is not the work of a mindless brawler. This is a brilliant commander. But that military genius had a flip side, a much, much darker side. And after he won the battle at Acre, we really got to see it. So, the city surrenders. But then there's a disagreement about the ransom payment. Richard's solution? It was cold and brutally pragmatic. He had 3,000 Muslim prisoners led out, and he had them all slaughtered. This is not the noble hero from the storybooks. This is a medieval warlord, plain and simple. And who was he fighting against? The legendary Sultan Saladin. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Their relationship wasn't this black and white, good versus evil thing. Not at all. It was actually one of mutual respect, like professional respect between two incredible military minds. Richard even got in trouble back in England for being too friendly with Saladin. And it's exactly this kind of complex, messy reality that the simple legend just wipes away.
So the big question is, how does that guy, the complicated, ruthless, but respected commander, get turned into this squeaky clean national hero? And maybe even more important, why did that happen?
Well, a huge part of the answer is right here. It's a really popular poem from the 14th century called Richard Coeur de Lion. Now, you gotta understand, this wasn't a history textbook. Not even close. This was pure creative storytelling. It was meant to be entertaining, and as we're about to see, it was also very political. You could almost think of this poem as, well, as medieval fake news. See, it was written when England and France were at each other's throats, and the French had their big hero, Charlemagne. So England needed one of its own. What does the poem do? It takes that complex, respectful rivalry between Richard and Saladin and turns it into a simple good guys versus bad guys action movie. Suddenly, Richard is the perfect English Christian king, and Saladin, the guy who actually respected, gets turned into a two-dimensional villain. Okay, but here's where the whole thing just gets weird. Like, really weird. Because the very story that was written to make Richard into this perfect hero also gave him a demonic backstory.
No, seriously, get this. In the poem, Richard's mom, who's based on the real Eleanor of Aquitaine, turns out to be a demon. And when she's forced to sit through a Christian mass, she literally flies out the church window and just vanishes from the poem. So, yeah, England's great Christian hero is part demon. What do you even do with that?
So what on earth is going on here? Well, scholars who've looked at this think the poem isn't actually trying to make him a stable hero at all. They say he's what's known as a carnival king, this medieval idea of a figure who represents chaos and disguise. One minute, he's the hero. The next, well, another character in the poem calls him a mad devil right to his face. So the poem that was supposed to make a simple hero accidentally created this unstable, fragmented monster instead.
Okay, so we've got the historical warrior and we've got the literary demon. But hold on, because there's a third Richard. And honestly, this one might be the most surprising of them all. This is the Richard who has nothing to do with battles or poems.
Right? I mean, a ruthless commander and a literary half-demon? What else is there? Well, the answer is something that completely shaped the country he hardly ever set foot in, England. 10%, what's that about? That, my friends, was the Saladin tithe. To pay for his crusade, Richard brought in a tax of 10% on everybody's income and property. Think about that. It was the very first income tax in English history, a huge, huge step in giving the government the power to raise money for big projects. So, yeah, our great warrior king was also a trailblazing taxman. And he wasn't done building the state, not by a long shot. He's also a key figure in developing something called the Grand Assize. Now, before this, if you had a dispute over land, you might have to solve it with a trial by combat. Yeah, literally fighting to the death. Richard helped popularize a system where, instead, the king gets 12 knights together to investigate and decide the case. A group of 12 peers delivering a verdict. Sound familiar? It's a massive step away from just using brute force and a baby step towards the jury system we have today. Okay, wow. Let's try and pull all of this together. We've got the brilliant general, the cartoon hero, the demon from a poem, and the guy who reformed the legal system.
So at the end of the day, there isn't one real Richard the Lionheart. He's all of them. He's a composite. You've got the historical commander, a genius, but also brutal. You've got the national symbol, the hero cooked up for political propaganda. You've got the literary monster, that bizarre demonic character from the storybooks. And then you have the state builder, the bureaucrat, who, probably without even realizing it, helped shape English law and taxes forever.
And that kind of leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? Richard is this fragmented king, a puzzle pieced together from history, stories, and even government records. It really makes you stop and think, when we remember our heroes, any of them, whose story are we actually telling? Are we remembering the person who really lived? Or are we just remembering the character that we needed them to be?